Okay, so here's my top 5 kind of current historical crime reads plus one alternative history. We're going to start with the alternative history, which is Aurelia by Alison Morton. These are part of the Romanova series that imagine that the Roman Empire still exists in the modern day in part of Italy. The society follows a kind of matriarchal structure, so the women sort of run the military and various things like this, and this follows families of people who are Romanovans and how they get involved in various kind of events and situations. It's very hard to sort of give too much detail away without giving a spoiler, but I absolutely adore this series because it takes quite an interesting concept of like, what if the Roman Empire still exists, and manages to weave a really interesting kind of crime thriller series around that. So definitely one to explore if you have not already done so. They are in series of books, so you can actually start with this one because they're in sort of different eras of Romanovan society, and there's like little trilogies within them. So yeah, definitely check out Romanova by Alison Morton. My next recommendation is a bit more of a straight kind of historical story. This is Fortune's Hostage by Julia Hardy. I adore these books if you love a Regency romance. So think Pride and Prejudice, anything by Jane Austen then, or any of the sort of modern ones that are told like that, you would thoroughly enjoy this series. There's Fortune's Hostage and Scandal with the Duke so far. They're kind of set in the Regency era, and there's a slight crime involved in all of them, but it does feature a bit of a romance as well. So they're quite an easy sort of entry into reading a bit of historical crime if you kind of prefer things like Bridgerton to read, because you're going to get that kind of story, but interwoven with quite a clever little bit of a crime story as well. Heartily recommend these. They're beautifully written, thoroughly enjoyable stories, and I'm really hoping there's going to be a third from the author based in this kind of era. Okay, next up is a book series by one of my favourite authors of all time, Elly Griffiths. A lot of hers have a historical context, so her main series, the Ruth Galloway Mysteries, follows a forensic archaeologist who helps the police solve crimes, so there's always an element of history in those as well, but I particularly enjoy these. This is her children's series, A Girl Called Justice. They're set during the wartime era, about a young girl who's at boarding school and she gets involved in solving crimes. The reason I enjoy these so much is because if they'd have existed when I was a kid, they would have been my favourite book series. I grew up loving things like Famous Five, Nancy Drew and Hardy Boys, and these are kind of on a parallel in that they're quite a safe story, but they're full of adventure and interest and a little bit of jeopardy. And Justice is such a great kind of feisty, interesting character. I think I would have wanted to be her when I was little, and I still love reading this series even now. And the special one about this one is it's also signed to me by the author from Harrogate Book Festival. But yeah, heartily recommend this series for kids and adults alike. You can still enjoy these as an adult, so definitely check these out if you like a wartime era story. Next up, I'm going to recommend the Cesare Aldo series by David Bishop, D.B. Bishop. These are set in kind of Renaissance Florence, following Cesare Aldo, who is, I don't know, the Renaissance version of a policeman guard, who is drawn into solving crimes in various places. Much more of a straight kind of crime thriller, but with an interesting spin on the fact. Due to this sort of era of history and the place they're written in, there's a lot of sort of hints of real life stories kind of woven in as well. Cesare is also gay, so that adds a layer of interest because he's gay in an era where he absolutely can't be, and he kind of has to hide that from his fellow investigators, and it definitely adds a layer of intrigue to this story. I adore this series of books. I started reading them to interview the author for my book group, and this is the one I'm currently about to start reading. So it's book 3. I think there's 5 books in the series, but yeah, I couldn't recommend this more. There's little bits of woven in Italian. The author goes and visits Florence to get the historical aspects correct. So yeah, this is a well woven, well researched, really interesting crime series, sort of set in an unusual time period for a historical crime series as well. So definitely worth checking out. Okay, so my second to last recommendation is Chris Beck's North Sea Tale. All of his books, apart from his current sort of Gangland series, have a bit of a historical nature to them. Well worth checking out his Great Frost series. But North Sea Tale is a book that drew me to his writing and left me wanting to read all of the other things he's written as well, so it's the one I'm recommending here. It's set on board a trawler off the coast of Hull, kind of early, like sort of 60s era ish, and there's crime happens on board, so it has to be someone on the ship who's done it. So it's like a locked room mystery essentially, but out on the perils of the North Sea. It is really well researched. Chris writes with passion and deep kind of interest about the stories of things that affected people in Hull. So Hull had a massive fishing industry and had a lot of trawlers leaving from it, and he spoke to people who'd worked on them and did his research to get the facts right. Same with his Great Frost series. There's a lot of like deep research and interest that's gone into it, and they're set in an area of the world that a lot of people don't know, but is a really beautiful part of the world. The trawlers themselves are an interesting thing, and the people who worked on them had to be quite tough. It was a very dangerous job, and all of that is woven into the story. It's very hard to tell you much about the story because it's a locked room mystery, so we can't give too much away, but the characters are well woven and really interesting, and if you like that kind of locked room style of story, then this is a really good one to start with. And then I'm going to finish up with one of my favourite reads of the year it came out and possibly of all time, which is A Maiden by Kate Foster. This is a historical crime story set in Edinburgh, or Corstorphine, which is a village near there, and it is based on a true story. So the woman in this really existed. She was accused of killing her uncle and lover and condemned to death by the Maiden, which is a guillotine, or like Edinburgh's version of that was used for executing kind of wealthy people. That's all known about if you go and Google this story. It's a very famous ghost story in Edinburgh, and the outcome of it is known because it's a true story, so I'm not giving anything away by telling you this. What happens though is that the author has taken this tale and imagined the events that have led up to the crime itself, and then the trial and all of that kind of thing, and it's really interesting. It's really well written. There's moments where there's like coffee house stories printed that I thought were real and were made up by the author, and it's a beautifully woven kind of telling of this woman's story, and the fact that she really existed kind of draws you into it even more. I adore this book. There's nothing bad I can say about it. It's beautifully, beautifully crafted. It's possibly one of the best historical crime stories that there is today. The King's Witches by Kate Foster is also excellent. I think she's one of the finest historical crime writers we currently have writing, much like D.V. Bishop, who I mentioned earlier. So definitely go and check this out because it's a great read. I hope you enjoyed my 5 historical crime recommendations, plus one alternative history because I didn't know quite where to put that one, but definitely go away and enjoy some really cracking reads.